And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Dolores Cannon is a regressive hypnotherapist and psychic researcher recording lost knowledge. She's been involved with hypnosis for more than 40 years and exclusively with past life therapy and regression work for a number of years as well. Now, over this time, she's developed her own very unique technique, which enabled her to gain the most efficient release of information from her clients. She's also been a UFO investigator, investigating crop circles in England, accumulating evidence from suspected abductees as well through hypnosis. Now, this is book number 4 in her series, Convoluted Universe. Welcome back, Dolores Cannon. It's been a while, Dolores. How are you?
I'm fine. They said they were having trouble with the line. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, because he said it sounded like a muddy a bucket of water.
Well, whatever Tommy did, he must have kicked the phone line. You sound pretty good now.
Okay, I told him it would be okay.
Are you still out there in the Ozarks?
Yeah, when I'm home. I'm still traveling. I'm traveling all over the world constantly, and you happen to catch me when I'm here. I was in Turkey just a few weeks ago, and I did a 2-day seminar in Istanbul.
Good for you. Gosh, I remember, Dolores, when we were talking 15, 16 years ago about conversations with Nostradamus and in your earlier stuff. You were just rolling then, remember?
Oh, yeah, but I'm still rolling.
Yes, you are. Don't stop.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in China now, in Russia. Last year, I was 3 months in Europe, every week in a different country. And this year is packed just as full. I'm hardly home at all.
What keeps you going, Dolores?
Everybody keeps saying, where do you get your energy from? They'd like a little piece of it.
Well, you do. You sound as energetic now as you did, almost 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, and I'm still going, and I'm still writing more books.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Now, tell me about this series, Convoluted Universe.
Okay. I've got 17 books out there, and I'm working on 3 more. And each one has got gradually more and more complicated because over the years, my work has been that way. The work I'm getting now, I could not have even understood it even 20 years ago. It has to happen gradually. You get a little piece, a little crumb, then you digest that, and then you get a little more and a little more. So they, the ones that are giving the information through my clients, they give you a new theory and a new idea, so it just keeps growing. But it really began to pick up when I got into the UFO research and I wrote The Custodians. And as I was working with that, and, I think I've talked about all of these subjects on your show.
Oh, you sure have.
But with that one, the ETs began to speak through the clients I was working with. And they began to give me complicated metaphysical theories and concepts. And I knew I had to go into a different kind of a book. So that's when I started the Convoluted Universe series. I thought it was going to be one book, but it developed now into 4. And each book has gotten more and more complicated. At the end of book 3, I said, well, I guess you've told me everything there is to know now. There's nothing else left to discover. And they said, oh, no, you have just started. There's a lot more to find out. And then I wrote Convoluted 4, and the information is still pouring out of my clients.
Well, this was a fascinating one because it deals with just about everything we've talked about on this show. The other side, abductees, UFOs, just about everything. So I'm looking forward to our very lengthy chat with you tonight.
Okay, because it just keeps getting more and more complicated. They keep throwing different ideas out at me.
Have you, by this time, come up with a single theory on just what the heck is going on?
In what area?
Well, just about, let's say in the visitation area. Something's happening.
I wrote 2 books. This was in 2011 when Convoluted 4 came out. That's the first year I wrote 2 books in 1 year. The other book was The 3 Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth. And this is where it was taking the whole UFO thing into a whole new area that hasn't been explored by the other investigators. They haven't got a clue what's really going on out there.
Well, in this one, number 4 deals primarily with extraterrestrial travel, doesn't it?
Well, some, but in the three waves, it goes into a whole lot more about the volunteers and where they've come from, and many of them are ETs that have come from other planets and other dimensions, and entered into a physical bodies, and there's hundreds of thousands of these. Of course, the people themselves are not aware of this until they have the session and they find out.
Now, when you talk about other dimensions, Dolores, are you talking about other universes or strictly other dimensions within this universe?
Within this universe, because this is not the only universe there is. There's hundreds and hundreds of universes. It goes on and on and on. But there are also many, many, many dimensions. There's not just 5. There are thousands. And in each of these dimensions, there's different realities. And they just go, well, see, there are dimensions around us all the time. We can't see them because they are vibrating at a different frequency and different vibration. It's just the way if you see a propeller blade or a fan blade, when it's moving, it speeds up, it becomes invisible. So they're vibrating at a different frequency.
Well, that's a good point. Now, is it still a physical dimension?
Yes, and there are people living in these dimensions. And this is very real. This is the way the ETs, one of the ways they travel, is they go back and forth between these dimensions.
They somehow learned how to do that, I take it.
Oh, yeah. They've been doing it for a long time. They raise the vibrations and frequencies of the craft, and when they're going out of this dimension, see, they raise the frequency, and then they will suddenly just disappear and be in the other dimension. Kind of like Star Trek, when he says, engage, and they're gone. This is when people see UFOs and they just suddenly disappear. They have gone into the other dimension. And the other opposite is true, too. When they're coming into our dimension, they have to lower the vibration and frequency. And then they just suddenly appear where there hasn't been anything there before. This is the densest, heaviest planet in the universe, the hardest, most difficult planet to live on. They said they can't go any lower, any denser. We are the bottom. And I doesn't like me to say that because it sounds like we're the bottom feeders.
Well, let me ask you this. By the traveling through these other dimensions, must you be in a craft, or can you do it in like a portal and kind of like walk through it?
Oh, yes, there are definitely portals and windows. Those are two different things, and they are all over the world. And the ETs especially have found these and are able to utilize them. A portal is where you can go through it and be in another dimension, another time. You can time travel. All of these are used. And some humans have been able to use them. The problem is with humans is the vibration and frequency of the body has to match the frequency of the portal or the body would be destroyed. The matrix would be destroyed. So these ETs have learned how to utilize these, and they travel through time and other dimensions in that way. A window is where you can look through at other dimensions and other times, but you can't travel through it. And these are everywhere. And they're usually protected to keep humans away because they know the effect it would have on humans.
Well,
but also humans go to other dimensions constantly and are not even aware of it.
Do we do that in a dream state or?
No, physically.
We do.
No, this is how it's very natural, and it's happening all the time, and we don't even realize it.
Of course, I'm sure some people have been in a fog sometimes, Dolores. Maybe that's what's happened to them, huh?
Well, I've gotten lots of emails. I have a weekly radio show, too.
Yes, you do.
And I get all these emails, people telling me these remarkable stories of things where they have accidentally gone into other dimensions.
At what point did these stories start arriving to you, and you started saying, there's something going on here?
Well, in my investigations, I guess the listeners are well aware of me now. They know I don't channel. I'm not a psychic.
Right.
All my information comes from my clients. And I never know what's going to come out. But I am so curious that I always want to know everything. I hear something I don't understand. I want to know more about it. But I can give you a few examples.
Sure, I'd love to hear them.
Stories.
Okay.
we've gotten. Well, for instance, sometimes it can be something very subtle, and you don't even realize you've crossed over in another dimension and came back. I had a college girl said she was coming out of her dorm, and there was a lot of construction work going on right in the street in front of the dormitory. And, you know, the orange cones up and the construction equipment, they were tearing up the street. Okay, the next morning she comes out of her dormitory. There's no sign of anything that's ever been done. These are little things we'll say, well, maybe it was my imagination, or they'll see a tree in one place. The next time they go by, that tree is not there. These are little things that we just don't really notice until it draws our attention.
But it's pretty similar, so that confuses them, I take it.
Yeah, and they said, well, it must be my imagination. I had one person who came out of the office building where they were working, and they were back in the, 20, 40 years, 50 years ago. The street, the cars, the people were all dressed as though they were in the 1950s and 40s. And they were very confused. They were walking down the street, and they kept saying people weren't even paying attention to them. But then they began to get scared because something wasn't right. So they went back to the office building. When they went back up into it, everything returned to normal. See, sometimes it's very dramatic like that.
Do these other people in these other dimensions see the person who's gone in there?
Well, they said it didn't seem like they were paying any attention to them.
So it sounds like they didn't even see them.
Yeah.
To me.
I had one person that said they were out at the airport watching the jets take off. And the jet would take off and get into the air, then it would go backwards, then it would go forwards, then it would go backwards. And, you know, jets can't do that.
That's right.
Before they suddenly just took off. This happened several times. Then they went out to the street. The cars were doing the same thing. So it's kind of like sometimes you're stuck. That's what I think it is. You're kind of on the perimeter of the dimensions, and it hasn't quite solidified. But I've had many, many stories of strange things like that. One woman said she was out jogging, and she was running down the street, and she saw this airplane coming in so low to the ground, and it was a big airliner, so low to the ground that she said, oh, it's going to crash. She could see the tail and the wings and everything. She turned around and ran back to the house to turn on the news because she thought surely there was a crash. Well, when we had our session, this is one of the things she wanted to find out about. What was that all about? So during the session, we found, they said, in another reality, another dimension, there was an airport over there. And the plane was just coming in for a landing. So she had temporarily crossed into the dimension where the airport existed, but it didn't exist in our dimension.
How did they get back, Dolores?
They just come back. They said we're doing this all the time and we don't even realize it, unless something like that stands out in your
Have you left? Let's assume I'm talking to you physically.
Yeah.
We're there, right? I'm back in St. Louis and you're there for a conference or something.
Yeah.
And I somehow stumble into another dimension. Am I still physically in the original dimension talking to you, or am I gone?
Well, that's complicated because they've told me sometimes, and I don't understand how, that I have disappeared from crowds of people when I'm in other countries. And according to me, I didn't realize there was any difference.